What a day it's been. Already taking notes in real time. All eyes on the White House as President Donald Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister go head-to-head on dollars and defense. Big questions loom at this hour, not the least of which, could President Trump change the course for Japan's Nippon Steel's blocked bid to buy U.S. steel? I'm Reed Cowan. Welcome in. So as soon as the two leaders step in front of a podium for a joint news conference, you'll see it right here on CBS News 24/7. It is one we are waiting for. So think about it like this. What's in the meeting of Ishiba's Japan and what's in the meeting for Trump's vision for America? This we know. Mr. Ishiba has been hunkered down with his advisors for a week preparing for that very big meeting. We're talking about strategy, the big issues, how much Japan pays for its own defense, and what more can Donald Trump squeeze out of Japan to get that nation to pay more for its own security? So here's what the president had to say just a moment ago.
We will be discussing North Korea and many other things. We'll be spending pretty much the day, but that's always a topic.
Mr. President, have you changed your mind about the sale of U.S. steel?
No, I think we're going to be discussing that today. No, I haven't, and I hear we'll have some pretty good information on that.
That's our Ouija Jang asking that question. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joining us now. All eyes on that U.S. steel bid. We know that President Biden put his foot in the door and said no. It looked at the time like President Donald Trump was with Biden on that, which is sort of rare, right? But now it seems like there's a little bit of an opening, Nancy.
That's right. Donald Trump is always somebody who likes to make a deal. So let's see what the Prime Minister of Japan has to offer him in that meeting that is going on right now, Reed. He has argued that steel is something that is so important to be made in the United States by U.S. companies, but U.S. Steel itself has argued that it is going to have to lay off American workers if they don't get this all-important cash infusion from Nippon Steel, a Japanese company. So the fact that President Trump told Ouija there that it's still up for discussion is really notable.
It is notable, especially given the fact that we have a president who was just voted in overwhelmingly by Americans on an America First agenda. Mm-hmm. Do you think those layoffs is how he's going to, if this does get through, and we don't know that it's going to get through, is how he's going to have to sell it to the American public?
Sure. And, you know, this is one of these issues where I think the American public is split, just like folks in the steel industry are split. There are union members who actually support the deal and having the Japanese come in and take over U.S. Steel. They say that's the only way they're going to be able to keep their jobs and actually see the company grow. And so this is not a cut and dried issue that has to do with sending U.S. jobs overseas. In fact, quite the opposite. There has been this really compelling case made that actually bringing in foreign investment would increase American jobs. So we'll see if the president is willing to move on that at all over the course of this meeting. He's going to be holding a press conference with the Japanese Prime Minister afterwards, and I'm sure he'll get asked about it again.
Right. And, you know, we know that U.S. Steel is not the only game piece on the board, so to speak. There's also the discussion of trying to get Japan to increase the amount of money that they put forward for their own defense. Any thought there that Japan may move on this to increase the percentage based on their gross domestic product?
They may have to, because what President Trump is likely to do with Japan is something that he's been doing with other countries, which is threatening tariffs if they don't do what he wants. It's part of the reason that he is threatening European countries with tariffs. He has always believed, for example, he just brought it up there again in the Oval Office, that European countries need to contribute more to NATO. They did do that during his first term, but apparently not enough for President Trump. And so it's not surprising that that is a line item on the list of things to be discussed in the Oval Office today. They'll also be talking, Reed, about China. This is something that both Japan and the U.S. Share concerns about Chinese influence in the region. The U.S., as you know, has already gone ahead and slapped some tariffs, new tariffs on Chinese goods, and the Chinese have retaliated. And that creates concerns for other countries in the region who worry that if there's a trade war, that will mean higher prices for them as well. So we're likely to hear coming out of that meeting more about that topic, too.
We know that you will be there and bring us those reports as soon as they step out. Nancy Cordes, always great to talk to you on a Friday or any day there from the White House. Let's turn now to breaking news from the FBI after the Department of Justice demanded a list of agents who investigated those January 6 cases. So, you know this, FBI agents, they sued. They were worried about their privacy, worried about safety concerns. We have an update at this hour. The U.S. government agreeing in court to not release that list of names. So that is a little bit of a relief. But that agreement is not long-lasting. It's only temporary, we're told. So in the interim, CBS News correspondent Scott MacFarlane found that the Bureau is in turmoil. Hear his interview with an agent whose name is reportedly on that list. Listen.
The largest criminal investigation in FBI history has given way to potentially its largest crisis.
Do you think this is a distraction?
Absolutely. Personally, I've lost sleep over this.
This agent who helped arrest January 6th rioters fears retaliation from new leadership of the Justice Department for speaking with CBS News.
We just have a lot of unknowns, and it feels like no one has our backs.
Trump allies at the Justice Department ordered the FBI to send a questionnaire nationwide to identify the personnel who investigated January 6th and make a list for leadership to review. The agent is one of approximately 5,000 names on that list.
What was it like filling out that questionnaire? Saying what you did and when you did it?
Really demoralizing. Defeated. We all feel defeated. And really for nothing. We just...
The scrutiny and storm cloud hovering over FBI employees over their work on cases that yielded more than 1,000 guilty pleas and a 100% conviction rate in jury trials sends a chilling message, the agent warns.
Moving forward, do we pick and choose? Are we allowed to pick and choose what we feel comfortable based
Do you
off
think
our...
this might scare people off taking certain cases in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, we're all humans.
Agents who testified or signed their names to public court documents worry of retaliation from riot defendants.
Your followers, any messages to them? Keep the fight, 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 fight.
Or their sympathizers.
It almost as if these defendants that were all pardoned have been put on a pedestal of being more patriotic and more loyal to this country than the men and women who go out every single day away from their families and put their lives on the line.
What do you make of that?
I really am at a loss for words. It hurts. We'll say that. It hurts.
A Justice Department official in a memo to the FBI earlier this week wrote that agents who are simply following orders or carried out their duties in an ethical manner will not be subject to discipline. But the agents and their attorneys tell CBS News they're not convinced. Back to you.
Scott MacFarlane there, thank you so much. When we come back, we continue to have all eyes and all monitors on the White House. What will happen when the Prime Minister of Japan comes out and talks with the President of the United States? What's the future of U.S. steel? We're going to have that conversation and what it means to your wallet when we come back. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Let's talk jobs. The January jobs report reveals new numbers on employment, and economists say the data is weaker than expected. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports the U.S. added 143,000 jobs last month. That's lower than projected, but at the same time, the unemployment rate edged down slightly from 4.1% in December to 4.4% in January. So let's go live to CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, what do you make of today's job report? Obviously, with the new administration, all eyes are on this early performance indicator.
Yeah, so look, I would say things are in a decent spot, but we are slowing down. Now, I do want to highlight this is for all of January, so the new administration can only really take credit for the back half of the report, but it's an early indication of the health of the labor market that the Trump administration is going to be dealing with. We do know that people are taking longer and longer to find jobs when they are out of work, and so when you see a lower number in terms of the openings, which came in versus what we were expecting, that's where you start to say, okay, things are slowing down. The fact that that unemployment rate number ticked down to 4.0% from 4.1%, less people are quitting, less people are moving away from those jobs. So like I said, we're in a decent spot, but we are slowing down.
Well, and we know one thing tends to affect the other. And of course, the big thing, the elephant in the room, is inflation. Everybody wanting to get that down because then that affects interest rates, et cetera. How does the jobs report really reflect inflation changes, or does it?
So the really good news about this jobs report is that wages picked up in terms of the increase in your salary. So that increased from 3.9% annually to 4.1%. The very good news about that 4.1% is that it's significantly higher where inflation stands right around 2.7 to 2.9%, depending on what index you're looking at. We want to see continued months where that happens, because when your wages grow, that's when you feel some of that relief in your pocketbook. But again, it takes months and months and sometimes years of that to happen, given how high inflation was. What my takeaway is in terms of how the jobs report and the inflation are interacting is that we are not getting an interest rate cut when the Federal Reserve meets at the end of March. The Fed always looks at where the labor market is and where inflation is, and the fact that you are seeing inflation continue to tick up right now, and you are seeing the labor market remain in a good spot, and that unemployment rate actually come down, indicates that there is not the case right now for an interest rate cut. So we would likely expect them to hold steady.
Even if you get a front row seat, Kelly? Even if you're there in March and there's a front row seat, no cut? What gives on a Friday? Kelly agreed. Okay. Thank you so much, my friend. We'd rather have the truth, right? So in the midst of so many questions about President Trump saying the U.S. would take over the Gaza Strip, House Speaker Mike Johnson and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met at the Capitol today. So let's listen in to what came from that meeting.
Today we discussed the special partnership that we have between these two countries, and I thank Prime Minister Netanyahu for his unrelenting commitment to making the region and the world a safer place amid really extraordinary challenges. What Israel has done in the past 7 months really is a testament to what can be accomplished when we do not let the enemy set the rules. As Prime Minister Netanyahu said Tuesday at the White House, when our enemies see daylight between Israel and the United States, they will exploit it, and we all know that is true. And that's why strong, decisive leadership is so crucial in this time. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu both understand that peace is secured through strength, not appeasement, and not by turning our backs on our allies.
I'm now completing a week in which began with an extraordinary meeting with President Trump. And under his leadership, the critical decisions that show his commitment and the American people's commitment to Israel have come to the fore instantly. First, he renewed immediately the supply of weapons that had been stopped, which we need as we're fighting for our future, for our existence, and for the broader Middle East in a seven-front war. He immediately released those weapons. He issued yesterday these sanctions on this scandalous and corrupt organization, the ICC, that threatens the right of all democracies to defend themselves by themselves. And he's done so many things in the interim, just in 2 weeks. Space to do that.
I can't wait.
You'll be welcome on a red carpet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so a lot of handshaking there. Welcome with the red carpet, right? But let's go live to CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small. Torian, really what I didn't hear there was a drill down and getting very specific on what President Trump said regarding the U.S. potentially taking over the Gaza Strip. Statements that seem to have some backing and support from Mr. Johnson. Any particulars on that?
And we also saw subsequently the president walk back a potential timeline on if that would happen. But I agree with you. That was something that was absent from these conversations, according to folks in the room. I talked to Senator Richard Blumenthal, who was a part of a bipartisan delegation that sat down with Netanyahu this week. And he said that wasn't even a part of the discussion. He said there's no expectation that the U.S. would be a part of this redevelopment and would especially not be tasked with financing that great overhaul happening there in Gaza if this were to happen. What we did see, though, in this press conference and the meeting that preceding it between Johnson and Netanyahu was a reaffirmation of sorts of the U.S.'s alliance with Israel. Johnson also laid at the feet of President Trump the progress and success of a Hamas-Israel ceasefire deal, and they reaffirmed their hope to extend that ceasefire and ultimately peace in that region.
Well, and keep in mind, we're still in phase one of what is hopefully going to be 2 phases of the hostage release and ceasefire deal. So that's a very tenuous bubble to be on. Let's switch gears also. This morning, Speaker Johnson said that details on a new budget resolution could be released soon to help advance the president's agenda. Keep in mind, Congress writes the checks, right? So the Senate is also working on their own package, but are they on the same page?
That's unclear, and I should mention the reason why this press conference or this photo op, it wasn't really a press conference, they didn't take questions, between Netanyahu and Johnson happened today is because it was postponed from yesterday. It was a 5-hour-long meeting with House members and the White House that ran long because of these intense conversations about how exactly to implement and allocate funding for the president's agenda. We know that several members of the House conference met in Mar-a-Lago or met in Florida last week. This week, Senate Republicans will be headed down to Florida to meet with the president to discuss exactly how they move forward with that. Priorities don't necessarily seem to match. A lot of Senate Republicans have said that they want to prioritize spending on energy, the military, and a border wall. Republicans have a long laundry list that they got from the president, including the 2017 tax cuts and other items that the president has talked about on the campaign trail. The goal here, though, is to get something done sooner than later as they're looking to utilize the budget reconciliation process. They also, though, have to address the debt limit that was pushed off. That was a part of the initial negotiations and the government funding deal that happened before President Trump took office that ultimately wasn't included. So that will have to be a significant piece of this conversation.
And correct me if I'm wrong, March 13th, that's the deadline? March 14th? Mid-March, okay.
March 14th to avoid a government shutdown.
All right, so the Senate just confirmed Russell Vought. He's the White House budget director. How is policy expected to change under his leadership?
Well, Democrats are warning that this is the most dangerous confirmation Senate Republicans have pushed through yet. They're noting that he is an architect or known as an architect of Project 2025. And as Trump's budget chief, he would essentially allow, in their words, Trump unfettered access to dismantling the federal government as we know it. This comes after Trump, before he was even confirmed, went ahead and signed quite a few executive orders that reformatted a lot of organizations, that also include significant staffing cuts to several federal departments. That's something that they're saying the American people should be concerned with. I should also note, though, as part of this confirmation process, we've seen fewer and fewer Republicans defect from Trump's will on these more controversial picks. Pete Hegseth saw only 3 Republicans defect there. Since then, Russell Vought hasn't seen as much pushback. Democrats recognize this, so they're saying they're going to stall these processes, not necessarily because they believe they could change Republicans' mind, but they want to broadcast to the American public that these are the people that Trump's putting up to control the government, essentially, and they want to make sure that they know that this is the wrong direction for America to go down.
Okay, so speaking of confirmations, we're looking into next week. We're at Friday now. The Senate will vote to confirm whether Trump's 2 most embattled cabinet picks get through. We're talking, of course, about Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for Secretary of Health and Human Services. What can we expect from those votes? Are we seeing a trend there as well going into next week?
Reed, the math is mathing for them. There are not as many Republicans who have reservations about them. Some of the ones we were watching, for example, like Todd Young of Indiana, who had some questions about Tulsi Gabbard's effectiveness in the role. He faced significant pushback from folks in Trump's world, and this intense pressure campaign has been pretty significant. J.D. Vance, the vice president, has also served as a power broker of sorts, coming to the Hill, talking to these Republicans who have been on the fence, and it's ultimately been effective in pushing through these members. Again, the numbers just aren't in the Democrats' favor here. If they can't get 4 Republicans to vote against the party, then it's likely we'll see these 2 especially breeze through their confirmations next week.
Yeah, we keep hearing from Democrats those words, 4 principled Republicans. And you're yet to see them get what they are hoping for. Nice to talk to you, Torian Swell. You have a great Friday. We appreciate the update. Well, let's move on to this. Crews in Alaska searching right now for a small plane missing with 10 people on board. That regional airline flight taking off yesterday afternoon in western Alaska. Still, at this hour, no word on any of their identities, but the disappearance, if you're keeping track, marks the third major U.S. aviation incident in about a week. We're talking about the crash of that medevac jet in Philadelphia and then the helicopter and plane crash near D.C. From a plane crash in Alaska to one in Brazil, look at the upper right part of your screen. This is a traffic camera's view catching a moment that a small plane went down on a busy street in Sao Paulo. That crash killed the two sole people aboard that aircraft. We're talking about the pilot and the passenger. A lot of residents with cameras caught this incident, posted it on social media. Look at the aftermath there. Fire crews on the scene said it wasn't really clear if that plane was attempting to make some sort of an emergency landing after taking off, but you see the results there. It slid hundreds of meters and then hit a bus before it exploded. We don't know the fate of the people on the bus, but we're asking that question as well. We have our international cameras poised on that story. Well, the National Weather Service confirmed 2 tornadoes touched down in eastern Tennessee last night. This is in Morgan County. It's about 2 hours east of Nashville. And let's go a little closer. This is a look at the aftermath. 2 people killed here. Officials say the victims were mother and daughter, both of them from the same household. In fact, at least 3 others are also injured here. The damage prompted schools in that area to close today just to be very careful. Look at those ominous skies. Crews on the ground cleaning up the fallen debris and the trees that are littering that area. Those tornadoes just can hit that fast, Jess.
And we continue to keep a close eye on that exact same community because right now they're gearing up for more ice storms and snowstorms heading into this weekend's forecast just throughout the Midwest. And so what happened last week, or actually earlier this week, the atmospheric river that impacted all the West Coast, that same system is now being dragged along the states and it's bringing them more snow right around the corner. I'm going to show you that right now on the map so you can kind of see this whole painted picture. All throughout this week, we were talking about heavy amounts of rain falling throughout California and the West Coast. And now that exact same system, it's going to loop again, and you'll see it, is that snowstorm that's pushing its way over Montana, all throughout the Great Lakes, picking up some moisture from the south, closer to Alabama and throughout the Carolinas. And that's going to create some icy conditions for our friends right around the corner, off closer to West Virginia, where a lot of winter storm advisories are in effect right now. That's that purple color you see behind me, stretched all throughout those northern states too. So take a look behind me. I want to gear you up and get you ready to go. When it comes to this strong storm, we're expecting snowy conditions from Montana all the way over into Minnesota just throughout the afternoon hours for Friday. That continues to track off closer to the Midwest. We head all the way over into the Carolinas. That's where that snow, ice, rain mix starts to occur as we head into this weekend's forecast, making it challenging for travel and just hitting the highways, hitting the roads and the airports too. Ice accumulation can get close to around 1/100 of an inch, even more than that in certain communities just along those hills close to West Virginia and southern portions of Pennsylvania. Now you take a look at the snow forecast. This is impressive. We could see up to around 10 inches of snow on the opposite end of the Great Lakes, a little bit less on the back end, but you head all the way over into areas like upstate New York. Places like Syracuse could get close to around 10 inches just within 2 days alone. So it's going to be a snowy setup. They're going to be packed in with all of that as we head into Saturday and Sunday. And our friends just a little bit more south, well, they're going to see plenty of rain. So ice, snow, rain, they're getting it all right now just after that devastating tornado happened too.
Okay, Jess, thank you so much. All right, talking about executive orders by the President of the United States, from orders to lawyers. More arguments against that executive order regarding birthright citizenship challenges when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. So we've learned in a new court filing moments ago, after days of resistance, the director of the FBI sent over the names and the information of FBI employees investigating January 6 cases to the Department of Justice last night. However, both parties agreed to not publicly publish those names before the court has something to say about it. So what does this mean? We know who to ask. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joining us. Now, Jessica, why are we even having this conversation? It used to be that it was a given that we didn't release the names of people who protect and serve our nation. What's changed?
What's changed is we have a new administration that's changing a lot. I mean, you and I have talked about executive orders. We'll talk about those. And we have an administration who is changing the way we do business and is saying to the Department of Justice, ask for FBI agents to identify themselves if they worked on January 6th. We know one of the president's very first things that he did once he was sworn in again was to pardon everybody who had been convicted or pleaded guilty regarding the events of January 6th. And now he's seeking to find out which members of the FBI worked on that case. As you said very clearly, the parties have come to at least a temporary agreement, meaning don't disseminate the names of these FBI agents unless you either give 2 days and allow them to fight it, or you just want to wait until the next hearing in this case, because there will be more hearings in this case.
And we understand that this is only a temporary reprieve for those FBI agents who are worried that their names could get out and that they could be vulnerable to retaliation by those who, not only in this January 6th case, but in other cases they've been involved in prosecuting.
Well, that's right. And that's what the judge, I believe, will consider. So at this point, what we're doing is we're taking the temporary restraining order hearing off the table because the parties have come to a temporary agreement. Sometime next month, I believe in March, there will be a hearing on something called a preliminary injunction. And the same arguments will come up. And the arguments will be FBI agents saying, I fear for my safety. I fear for the safety of my family. And we'll essentially ask, what is the purpose behind allowing anything other than my employee identification ever to become public, in the sense of why would this information ever need to be disseminated to the public at large? There will be arguments, and then a judge will make a decision.
Be fascinating to watch that. Let's pivot now to this conversation in regarding President Trump's executive orders on birthright citizenship. We've now seen 2 court rulings. Appeals are in process, but there's also a hearing going on in Boston. Tell us what you know about that.
So we know that it's basically the same arguments, and the arguments are, I'm going to characterize them as arguments to uphold the executive order on the basis of a new interpretation of the 14th Amendment. So we know that the executive order tries to essentially strip certain people of birthright citizenship. What is birthright citizenship? It comes to us from Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And I believe that a good reading of the plain language of the 14th Amendment tells us, if you're born in this country, it does not matter what the status of your parents are. You are a citizen of this country. The Supreme Court for over 100 years has adopted that interpretation. And so what we read in these various court hearings are, I think, efforts to try and get this case to the Supreme Court and try to get the Supreme Court to adopt another interpretation, because right now, any lower court is bound by the Supreme Court's definitive interpretation of what the Constitution means. And at this point, again, case law indicates that this executive order, in my view, just cannot stand.
Well, play it out to the Supreme Court then, given all of that precedent. If the Supreme Court were to side with Trump's position on this, that would be earth-shaking.
It would be. That would be a completely different understanding of the 14th Amendment, again, put into the Constitution after the Civil War and the Reconstruction era, in part to say to people who are formerly slaves or the children of slaves, you're born in this country, you're a citizen, it does not matter what status your parents have. And so if the court were to go back and look at language in the 14th Amendment that talks about subject to the jurisdiction thereof, that you are born in this country and subject to this country's jurisdiction. If they were to reinterpret that to exclude people who have currently been included, that would be a huge change in the law and obviously would have deeply significant repercussions for people.
You speak of reinterpretation of constitutional language. What other ramifications could happen, Jessica? It will be definitely for the history books no matter what. So let's pivot and talk about USAID and attorneys and what they're moving relative to that. USAID is literally on fumes now, down from 10,000 staffers to 600 essential staffers. What's going on in the courts there?
So what's going on in the courts there are a couple of different things, but the main, as I see it, the main legal argument that people need to know is that there is a Clinton-era statute from 1998, And it's a statute that helps us kind of define USAID and define its status. And it said to President Clinton, if you want to try and do away with USAID, go ahead, but you have 90 days. He said, I don't want to. And in the statute, there's nothing that prospectively would allow a future president to make significant changes. I believe that there's a good legal argument that what we're seeing right now, that essentially firing all of these workers, trying to put USAID under the State Department, that under this Clinton era statute we've been talking about would be viewed as a significant enough legal change that you would need Congress to bless it. And so those are very briefly, I think, the biggest legal arguments when it comes to USAID, and essentially trying to, for lack of a better word, kind of disseminate it without talking to Congress about actually ending that particular agency.
Well, as our CBS News legal contributor, as an attorney, and as an educator, we know your students have no end of things to talk about these days. Jessica Levinson, good to talk to you, my friend. You have a good Friday. All right, let's talk about our Eye on America series. CBS News, it is our commitment to hear your stories in your community. You know, we've seen President Trump sign dozens of those executive orders since coming back to the White House. Case in point, what Jessica just talked about. One of them is aimed at cutting federal support for gender-affirming care for people under the age of 19. President Trump says his order, quote, protects children from chemical and surgical mutilation, close quote. Those are his words. The order also bars some insurance companies from funding this care that forces hospitals across the country to pause that gender-affirming care for minors. CBS News Colorado's Sarah Horbikowitz talks with one family who will no longer get those gender treatments.
So we're terrified. I can't get her out of the country and I can't get her care. It seems like a death sentence to me.
In Boulder, Colorado, Manny's family is caught in the middle of national politics.
My child, just trying to get a good grade in biology now, and starting to see that the world is chipping away at just the basic things that make her happy.
Manny's 16-year-old daughter is transgender and has been getting gender-affirming care for years, but that ends this month.
We have enough time to maybe get one more shot.
Following President Trump's recent executive orders rolling back transgender protections, Manny's insurance will no longer cover that care, and local hospitals will no longer provide it.
The out-of-pocket cost is over $200,000, which we're willing to do. Well, we'll take on the debt. I have doctors that verify, with writing that these are all treatments that we need to keep her alive, and I can't do anything.
So Manny and his family started packing to leave the country, looking for political asylum elsewhere.
I don't care. If it's a third world country and they let me sleep in a box and keep my daughter safe, that's what I'm going to do.
Right before Trump took office, they applied for their passports, but his daughters never came in.
We got a letter. Do you want to confirm male or female as the gender marker? And of course we said yes, because that's how my daughter expresses herself. And then that's when things got locked up.
The family then tried to change the passport gender to male so it matches the immutable biological classification, which is now required by President Trump's executive order. But the passport is stuck in the system.
Constitutionally, as an American citizen, she's allowed to have one. And there's no resources right now for us to be able to pursue any line forward, A, to get her to safety without a passport, or B, to provide her care.
Those plane tickets are booked for Monday, but Manny doesn't know if they'll be on that flight.
The parent, I hurt seeing her hurt, but I can't imagine how she really hurts.
I'm Sarah Horbakowitz, CBS Colorado.
Sarah, thank you for that story. Okay, so when we see it, you see it, and we are starting to see some movement there at those two podiums there at the White House. A joint news conference between the leader of Japan and the newly elected leader of the United States of America. What is the fate and future of those relationships, not the least of which the fate and future of U.S. steel? You're watching CBS News 24/7 on a Friday. We're back in a moment. Let's go to the state of Tennessee, where a possible tornado killed 2 people and injured at least 3 others. Our CBS partners at WVLT staying on top of this for their viewers, showcasing the power of the CBS family. Let's watch from their coverage earlier today.
What a difference from coming up here this morning when we drove up around 5 o'clock, pitch black. you couldn't see much going on. Quite a contrast to Sunbright. When the Sunbright tornado hit last year, you remember that was in the town of Sunbright. The buildings right on the town square. You couldn't miss it when you came through. And the pitch black, we were driving right down some of these roads and you couldn't really see. And now, some of that devastation once the light comes up and you really start to see what people went through last night. I mean, there's a tree going right in the middle of that mobile home, that white mobile home right in front of me. The size of some of these trees just flattened. It looks like a giant had just taken a step and just stepped perfectly in some of these spots. I can say from some of the damage that I've seen, we've also been near the part where unfortunately a mother and daughter lost their life. Kind of the same scene over there. We're going to head back over there in just a bit, but it's heartbreaking. So many different linemen, crews out here. Number one thing that jumps out at me. You've got TDOT out here. You name the national, local, state agency, any kind of electric company that is out here in Morgan County, Scott County. They have all hands on deck. Crews were cleaning this up at 9:30. Once this through, power poles moving through that have been replaced before the sun came up. People that had power, lost power, had it before the sun came back up, which is pretty miraculous. We're going to keep as we continue to learn more of just folks riding around on four-wheelers with chainsaws going, what can I do to help? Did you see someone that needed help? Did you see a road that needed cleared? These men and women up here are getting to work and trying to get their county back into a working order, at least get the roads open, get buildings, get these people out of buildings that need to be and homes secured, things like that. So we're going to stay on the ground for the rest of the day while crews continue to do that here in Morgan County.
CBS cameras fired up in Tennessee and also fired up right there in a place where they could probably use some warming. That looks like Yellowstone there, Jess, if I'm seeing some of that plume of steam coming up out of terra firma. This is beautiful Wyoming Yellowstone National Park. That winter storm bringing snow headed into the weekend. One of my favorite places on the planet.
It's beautiful. And remember just a few days ago when San Francisco, California broke records for their rainfall totals? That exact same atmospheric river that packed its punch into Northern California is now delivering heavy amounts of snow all throughout those northern states, from Wyoming over into the Dakotas, Minnesota, and it's matching up actually with some warmer moisture sweeping in from the south as we head into the next 24 hours, and that's going to create an ice system that sweeps its way off into the east, impacting areas like southern Pennsylvania, all the way up into northern portions of West Virginia. It's going to be a very impactful storm, but I want to show you just behind me what's happening. As we head all the way to the north, areas like California, they got hit heavy with that atmospheric river, delivering even more rain when it comes to that area of low pressure just to the north. It's kind of been pushing the system closer to Idaho, Montana, all the way throughout the Dakotas. Now there's winter storm advisories and warnings that are in effect throughout the evening hours tonight, and we're going to see that last until tomorrow too in certain communities as the snow forecast starts to really add up. Now throughout the Rockies, it's really hit or miss when it comes to the peaks. Some of the more populated areas like Park City or Steamboat Springs are expected to see anywhere up to around 5 to 6 inches of snow, but it's those smaller communities closer to the higher peaks that could see anywhere up to around a foot from that exact same atmospheric river. And now, like I said, it matches up with a lot of moisture coming in from the south. That's going to bring in icy conditions off into the east heading into this weekend. Reed?
All right, thank you so much. Super Bowl 59 just 2 days away. Are you ready? Kickoff for the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles is on Sunday, and CBS News reporter Katie Weiss is in New Orleans in the middle of all of the excitement. Katie Weiss.
Well, I'm standing outside the Caesars Superdome where workers have been going inside all throughout the morning to get everything prepped and squared away for the big game that's just 2 days away. Also, state police are gearing up their security measures as well. We got a behind-the-scenes tour of some of their new surveillance cameras. There's hundreds of new cameras around both the central business district here where the Superdome is located and in the city's iconic historic French Quarter, where these cameras have some controversial AI technology, but state police tell me that they're being used to really keep people safe, not only for this weekend, but into Mardi Gras as well. They're an important tool that even have thermal imaging technology. Some states in the western part of the country use them to help detect wildfires in their early stages. Now, in the meantime, fans are also getting very excited and prepped up for the big game. I've been talking with fans who are looking forward to not only the sporting event, but also the Super Bowl halftime show. It's going to be an historic show because it will feature for the very first time a solo rap performance. So the question on everyone's minds now is, will Kendrick Lamar sing his Not Like Us hit song? We will find out. It remains to be seen. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Katie, thank you so much. Well, how do you feel when you put one of those paper straws in your mouth? It's kind of, ugh, right? Could plastic straws make a comeback? What we're learning about a new executive order from the guy who likes Diet Coke, President Donald Trump. We'll be back. Well, when we see it, you see it, and we are looking right now. You see our live cameras at the White House. We are awaiting that joint news conference that we've been waiting for more than an hour after President Donald Trump and the Prime Minister of Japan step out of what are going to be some pretty high-level meetings. So many things at sway. The defense of Japan and how much Japan pays for that defense. President Donald Trump wanting to see Japan really double their commitment of their gross domestic product in funding the defense of Japan. That's a message he's sending to all international nations, right? But also that much talked about attempt by Japanese steel company Nippon Steel to try to buy U.S. steel. What kind of concessions could happen? So we're watching for that. As soon as those two gentlemen step before that podium, we will break to that on CBS News 24/7. But earlier, the president touched on a number of other topics during a face-to-face meeting with the press, including this moment about a possible meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. In fact, as early as next week. Listen.
We'll probably be talking to President Putin. I'd like to see that war end for one primary reason. They're killing so many people. You're losing millions of people on a battlefield. In this case, mostly the battlefield. You have 800,000 or 900,000 Russian soldiers are dead and very badly wounded. And the same thing with Ukraine. You have probably 700,000 with Ukraine. The numbers they gave are a little bit lower than that, but I believe those numbers aren't correct. I'd like to see it end just on a human basis. It's terrible what's going on. They have open fields with no protection. The only thing a bullet can hit is a human body, and the human body dies as soon as it gets hit. Now, I'd like to see that end. It's a ridiculous war. It would have never started if I were president. That war would have never started. Putin would not have started that war if I were president. And by the way, you wouldn't have had October 7th if I was president either.
So just to give you a little sense of timing, because you hear the interpreter there behind the president. As we mentioned, all of that was said during a sit-down with the Japanese Prime Minister in the Oval Office that cameras were allowed into earlier this morning. So that was earlier this morning. Now a meeting is taking place, and that's when we are awaiting the world leaders to come out and tell us what came of that meeting. Once again, those two world leaders, President Donald Trump and the Prime Minister of Japan, expected to speak to the press any moment now. So many questions lingering about what they were able to accomplish behind closed doors. So we're also learning more about that Black Hawk helicopter crash with the American Airlines plane. Here's some new findings. It had a safety system turned off. That information from Senate Commerce Chair Ted Cruz. 67 people killed in last week's crash near Reagan Airport. In Washington, a priest attacked in the middle of a prayer service in Spokane. The assault caught on the church's live stream. Look at this. You can see a man jump up, run to the altar, attacking Father David Gaines. Worshippers jumped in, restrained the man. Police arrested the suspect. Still, we don't know what the motive was on this. New body camera video out of Northern California, and look at this. It shows sheriff's deputies jumping in fast, rescuing a woman from floodwaters. The woman was trapped in a sinking car as it filled with water. Listen.
Are you in there? Where are you in the back? Hey.
Well, this happened Tuesday just north of San Francisco. Deputies say the woman lost control of her car. She hit a puddle, ended up in a flooded creek. This is up near Marin County, the Point Reyes area. And it's been a deadly flood watch up there. 2 people killed. This woman, though, luckily survived because that deputy was able to break that window, pull the women out as the water rose just up to the level of her mouth. She is alive because of those quick actions and, of course, the training of first responders. President Donald Trump saying he will bring back plastic straws with the signing of his pen. So he posted to Truth Social just a moment ago. I will be signing an executive order next week ending the ridiculous Biden push for paper straws, which don't work. Back to plastic, he says, end quote. Trump is referring to a move from the Biden administration last summer calling for the federal government to phase out single-use plastic straws in its buildings. That's it for us on CBS News 24/7. The news continues.